I cannot believe this is happening to me. John whispered to himself as he stepped out into the cold night, the door closing softly behind him, but the echo of betrayal ringing loud in his ears. He had never imagined that after years of quiet dedication, his own wife, Emily, and her family would turn against him so suddenly, demanding that he leave the home he had thought was shared in mutual respect. And yet there he was, standing on the driveway under the pale glow of the street lamp, the chill biting through his coat, his mind racing to piece together the events that had led to this moment of absolute shock. He recalled the morning conversations where Emily had seemed distant but never hostile, and he realized now that the signs had been subtle but clear to anyone paying attention. She had been planning this for weeks, perhaps months, and yet the extent of her intentions was hidden from him until now. The thought made him shiver as much as the wind brushing past. He remembered the simple gestures of kindness they had shared in the past, the breakfast he had made her before work, the weekend walks through the park, moments that had seemed ordinary but now felt like distant echoes of a life that was unraveling faster than he could comprehend. The neighbors' lights flickered as someone passed by, unaware of the drama unfolding. On this quiet street, John hugged his arms to himself and tried to recall how it had come to this point, how a partnership of years could dissolve into such sudden animosity. He replayed every argument, every misunderstanding, and every unspoken resentment in his mind, trying to make sense of the human heart and the fragile nature of trust. But no explanation seemed sufficient to account for the cold precision with which Emily and her family had orchestrated his removal. The door to the home was locked now, the last barrier separating him from the life he thought he knew. He paced the driveway, considering what to do, wondering if there had been signs he had ignored, clues in the way she had spoken, the way she had smiled, moments that now seemed loaded with hidden meaning. The thought that he might have been living alongside someone plotting his exile made his chest tighten. He took a deep breath and considered his next steps, knowing that the night was long and the cold would not be kind. Yet within him there was a spark of determination, a refusal to accept this sudden judgment without reflection. He thought about his own worth, the contributions he had made, the quiet labor that had built the foundation for their life. And despite the shock and humiliation, he recognized that this was not the end of his story. The night stretched on, filled with the whistling wind and the distant sounds of the sleeping neighborhood. He made his way to the small bench near the driveway, sat down, and let himself feel the mixture of betrayal, confusion, and awakening. As he considered what he had overlooked in the past, the blind spots in his understanding of those closest to him, the hidden dynamics that had remained invisible until this moment of crisis, John realized that within the darkness of rejection lay an opportunity for insight, a chance to evaluate his life, and perhaps take control of the narrative in a way he had never done before. He resolved to observe, to think, and to plan, knowing that sometimes the most profound transformations begin with a single step into the cold, uncertain night. And as he looked up at the moonlight reflecting off the frost, he felt a quiet determination grow, the kind of resolve that comes not from anger, but from clarity, from the understanding that even in moments of deepest betrayal, a person can find strength, direction, and ultimately, a path forward that was entirely their own. The night was harsh, but John's mind was alert, considering every possibility, reflecting on the past, and imagining the future, as he prepared to navigate a journey that would test his patience, his wisdom, and his resilience, a night that would mark the beginning of self-discovery, empowerment, and a re-evaluation of the life he thought he knew. The wind continued to swirl around him, and with it, a new determination to reclaim his narrative and explore the potential that had always existed quietly within him, waiting for the right moment to awaken, and John knew that moment had come. John wrapped his coat tighter as the icy wind cut through the night, stepping cautiously along the quiet street, his breath forming small clouds in the cold air, the betrayal from Emily and her family still fresh in his mind. He thought back to the morning when he had tried to speak with her calmly, hoping for an explanation, only to be met with dismissive words and an unyielding determination that he should leave immediately. The sense of disbelief weighed heavily on him, and he felt the sting of the cold more sharply as he realized that his home, the place he had built and cared for, no longer welcomed him. The headlights from a passing car briefly illuminated his path, revealing the frost-covered lawns and silent homes. Reminding him of the normalcy that continued outside his personal storm, he walked slowly, retracing the steps to the corner cafe he had once enjoyed for morning coffee. Remembering moments of warmth and laughter that now seemed distant, he considered calling a friend for support but hesitated, knowing that some things needed to be processed alone. The muffled sounds of life inside nearby houses made him realize how isolated he felt despite being in the middle of a familiar neighborhood. John paused near a lamppost, taking in the quiet, the cold metal grounding him as he tried to gather his thoughts and plan his next steps. He reflected on the subtle signs he had overlooked, the small tensions and hidden frustrations that had accumulated over time, recognizing that sometimes the most significant changes happen quietly until a moment of revelation forces acknowledgement. He remembered the trust he had placed in Emily and how it had been shattered, replaced by uncertainty and a need to reevaluate everything he had believed about their relationship. The night seemed endless, yet John felt a quiet determination begin to rise. The realization that his story was not over and that he had the agency to reclaim his life and navigate forward. He considered practical matters, where to stay, how to manage his resources, and how to protect himself from further emotional harm. The cold nipped at his fingers as he took out his phone, deciding to send a brief message to a trusted colleague, not for sympathy, but to secure a temporary place to regroup. As he pocketed the device, he looked up at the sky, stars obscured by clouds. Yet a faint glow suggested the dawn of a new possibility. The night, filled with wind and silence, allowed him to reflect deeply, to accept the shock, and to begin imagining a future not defined by betrayal but by resilience, clarity, and the careful, deliberate steps he would take to restore stability and find his footing again, knowing that each decision in the coming days would shape the path forward, and that even in this cold, seemingly isolating night, there existed the opportunity for growth, understanding, and the gradual rebuilding of trust in himself, and in the life he would craft anew. John reached the corner cafe at 12:43 a.m. But the lights were off, the chairs were stacked upside down on the tables, and the handwritten sign in the window said it would not open until 6. He stood under the small awning while cold mist gathered on his coat, looking through the glass at the empty counter where he and Emily used to sit on Saturday mornings before the marriage became a house full of people measuring his worth by what they thought he lacked. The locked cafe door reflected him back in pieces, tired eyes, shoulders hunched against the cold, one overnight bag in his left hand, and a calm expression that surprised him more than the betrayal did. Calm had always come to him late, after shock, after confusion, after the first wave of pain had burned itself out. Tonight, it came early, maybe because Emily's family had made the rejection so clean. Her father had stood in the hallway with his arms folded, telling John that a man who could not provide the lifestyle his daughter deserved had no place in that house. Her mother had looked away as if kindness might make her complicit. Emily had stood behind them in a robe, face pale but firm, and said, "Please do not make this harder than it has to be." That sentence kept returning to him. Not "I am sorry," not "this is wrong," just a request that he make his own humiliation convenient. John walked to the side of the building, where the wind was weaker, and pulled out his phone. The trusted colleague he had messaged, Mark Ellis, had replied with a single line, "My guest room is open. Come over." John stared at it until something in his chest loosened. One open room in a night full of closed doors. He ordered a ride, then waited under the awning while the cold pressed through his shoes. During those 15 minutes, memories came in sharp, unwanted flashes. Emily laughing on their first winter trip to Vermont, her cheeks pink from the cold, saying she loved that he never tried to impress people. Emily 3 years later, sighing when her brother joked that John dressed like a school principal. Emily last month, letting her sister say that marrying safe was not the same as marrying well. Safe. That word had followed him around their marriage like a dog no one admitted owning. Safe when they needed him to pay a bill. Safe when Emily needed him to drive her father to medical appointments. Safe when the family needed someone steady at holidays, someone useful enough to rely on and unimpressive enough to mock. The ride arrived at 1:08, headlights cutting through the mist. John got in without looking back toward the neighborhood. Mark lived 20 minutes away in a small brick townhouse near the river, and when he opened the door, he did not ask for the whole story. He simply handed John a towel, pointed toward the guest room, and said, "Sleep first. Talk tomorrow." That kind of mercy nearly broke him. Not because it was grand, but because it asked nothing from him. The guest room had a narrow bed, a desk lamp, and a stack of clean blankets at the foot. John set his bag down and removed his shoes slowly, noticing how numb his toes had become. He sat on the edge of the bed and finally opened the envelope he had grabbed from his home office before Emily's father escorted him to the door. It was from Whitmore Capital, a firm his late uncle had once mentioned in passing, part of a family trust John had never fully understood because the paperwork had always moved through attorneys and old financial managers. Most of his life, he had treated it like background noise, something distant and complicated, not something real enough to change the way people saw him. But tonight, with the house gone cold behind him, the letter felt different. He unfolded the pages under the warm desk lamp. Annual beneficiary statement. Consolidated holdings. Private equity distributions. Majority ownership interest. His eyes slowed over the number at the bottom. $1,200,000,000 in assessed net assets. For a few seconds, John did not breathe. Then he read it again, more carefully, waiting for the number to become smaller, waiting for some footnote to explain it away. It did not. Outside the guest room window, the river lights trembled in the dark. Inside, John sat in borrowed blankets, still smelling faintly of cold air, holding proof that the family who called him worthless had not even known what they were throwing out. He did not smile. He did not feel rich. Not yet. He felt awake, as if the night had taken everything false and left one brutal truth in his hands. Emily had not kicked out a failure. She had locked the door on the man she never bothered to understand. By morning, John had read the beneficiary statement 7 times, and the number still looked unreal under the pale guest room light. $1,200,000,000. Not lottery money. Not a fantasy. Assets spread across private equity holdings, commercial real estate, dividend accounts, and majority ownership interests that had been managed for years by trustees, while he lived like an ordinary husband in a house where Emily's family judged him by his car, his coat, and the fact that he did not brag. Mark Ellis found him at 7:15 sitting at the small desk, the papers arranged in careful rows, coffee untouched beside him. Mark did not whistle or ask if it was a joke. He worked in corporate finance, and his face changed the way professional faces change when numbers stop being conversation and become reality. "John," he said quietly, "this is not just money. This is structure." John nodded, though his mind was still catching up. Structure. That word mattered. It meant the life Emily's father called failure had been sitting beside a machinery of wealth too large for casual understanding. It meant the trust had not been background noise. It had been protection. His late uncle, Richard Whitmore, had built the fortune through logistics, medical supply warehouses, and a chain of industrial parks across the Midwest, then placed major holdings into a layered family trust after a messy business dispute decades earlier. John remembered Uncle Richard as a quiet man in brown loafers who brought books instead of toys at Christmas, and once told him, "People who need to see your wallet before they respect you are not people you should invite into your decisions." At the time, John thought it was just old man advice. Now it felt like a map left behind on purpose. Mark made eggs, toast, and another pot of coffee, because practical men know shock needs food before philosophy. They sat at the kitchen island while John called the number listed at the bottom of the statement. The call transferred twice before a woman with a calm voice introduced herself as Catherine Miles from Whitmore Capital's private client office. She verified his identity, asked whether he was in a secure location, and then explained what John had never forced himself to understand. He had reached full controlling beneficiary status 6 months earlier after the final estate condition cleared. Notices had been mailed. Emails had been sent to the old shared inbox Emily mostly used for household subscriptions, charity events, and her mother's travel confirmations. John closed his eyes. The envelope he grabbed last night was not the first notice. It was the one that survived the pile. Catherine offered to schedule an in-person review that afternoon, and John said yes. His voice sounded steady. He was grateful for that. At 9:32, Emily texted, "You can come pick up your remaining things when Dad is here." At 9:41, another message came. "Please do not make this dramatic." John looked at the phone, then at the statement spread across Mark's counter. Dramatic. They had pushed him into the cold after midnight, and still wanted the story arranged neatly enough for their comfort. He typed no response. Instead, he forwarded both messages to a family attorney Catherine recommended, a woman named Denise Carter, whose office replied within minutes. By noon, John had showered, shaved, and borrowed one of Mark's navy overcoats. It fit a little wide in the shoulders, but when John looked in the hallway mirror, he did not see a man pretending to be rich. He saw a man no longer willing to be measured by people who had never learned the scale. The private client office occupied the 42nd floor of a downtown tower, with quiet carpet, smoked glass doors, and a receptionist who stood as soon as he gave his name. "Mr. Whitmore," she said this way. John almost corrected her, then remembered his full legal name on the trust: John Whitmore Hale. Hale was the surname he used daily. Whitmore was the door his uncle had left unlocked until he was ready to walk through it. Catherine Miles greeted him in a conference room overlooking the city, where winter sunlight turned the rooftops silver. She placed 3 folders in front of him: ownership summary, liquidity plan, governance authority. Each title felt heavier than the last. For 2 hours, she explained holdings, voting rights, distributions, charitable obligations, and the industrial company where he held majority control through trust mechanisms. John listened carefully, asking quiet questions, writing notes in the margins. The more he learned, the less he thought about revenge. Revenge was small compared to responsibility. Emily's family had thrown him out thinking they were removing a burden. What they had actually done was remove themselves from his blind spot. By late afternoon, Denise Carter joined by phone and advised him not to return to the house alone, not to argue by text, and not to disclose more than necessary until documents were secured. Clean, legal, calm. John recognized the rhythm from every wise person who had entered his life that morning. When the meeting ended, Catherine slid one final document across the table: authorization to update all contact channels away from the shared household inbox. John signed it slowly. That was the first real act of the day. Not claiming the money, not proving anyone wrong, simply making sure his life no longer passed through a door Emily could close. Outside, snow began falling over the city, light and silent against the glass. John stood at the window with the folders under his arm, watching the streets below turn white, and understood that the cold night had not broken him. It had clarified him. By early evening, John had returned to his modest apartment carrying the folders from Whitmore Capital, the weight of responsibility settling in his shoulders like a mantle he had not asked for but could not ignore. Outside, the city lights glimmered faintly through a thin layer of snow, each reflection reminding him that life could be as unpredictable as the streets below, yet structured if approached with patience and careful planning. He placed the folders on the kitchen table, brewed a cup of strong coffee, and opened the governance document first, scanning through the detailed directives, board obligations, and the specific control he now held over the industrial company once managed passively by trustees. Each page revealed that the late uncle's careful planning had created not just wealth, but a safety net that protected John from impulsive decisions while empowering him to act decisively when necessary. Thoughts of Emily and her family surfaced. Their midnight betrayal had been sharp, cutting through the comfort of what he had assumed was a stable household. Yet that betrayal now appeared in a different light. They had tried to force him into vulnerability, unaware that the trust and structure in place meant he could not be moved by mere cold nights or harsh words. John made a mental note of each account, each shareholding, and the strategic assets that now required his attention. There were philanthropic commitments, financial distributions to other family members, and investment directions that could not be altered without significant legal oversight, a framework designed to ensure that the wealth would be used responsibly and that his actions would be guided by prudence rather than emotion. He moved to the living room window, where the streets below were bustling with early evening traffic, pedestrians carrying their own burdens, unaware of the unfolding drama in a small apartment high above. Mark had stayed a few blocks away, respecting John's need for space, yet ready if counsel or advice was needed. John called Mark, summarizing the afternoon, the insights, the obligations, and the options now open to him. Mark's voice on the phone was calm, measured, and affirming. He reminded John that wealth was not just about accumulation but stewardship, and that the next steps must be deliberate, thoughtful, and guided by both legal and moral frameworks. After the call, John reviewed the liquidity plan again, mapping out cash flow, operational oversight, and contingency reserves, ensuring that no sudden movements could jeopardize his position or the long-term stability of the enterprises. By the time dusk had settled, turning the sky into shades of indigo and gray, John felt a sense of clarity that had been absent before the revelations of the day. He had been thrust into a situation of immense responsibility, yet every decision, every note, every verified piece of information now stood as a testament to preparation, foresight, and the inheritance of more than just wealth, the inheritance of accountability and opportunity. The snow continued to fall, quietly covering the city in white, as John organized the documents, made a list of immediate priorities, and considered the day ahead. Each action taken now, whether reviewing a company report, updating legal contacts, or securing his personal and financial affairs, would be the foundation of a new chapter where he controlled the narrative and determined the outcomes, unaffected by past disregard or cold midnight expulsions. As night deepened, John looked out over the city, coffee in hand, and felt the first stirrings of empowerment, not from revenge or resentment, but from clarity, preparation, and the ability to shape a future no one had anticipated, including those who had thrown him out. The apartment, simple and unassuming, became the arena where plans would be made, strategies conceived, and the next steps toward a life fully in his own hands would begin, marking the end of passive endurance and the start of deliberate action. As morning light filtered through the blinds, John stood at the edge of the balcony, the city stretching endlessly beneath him, each building a testament to ambitions realized and challenges yet to come. The previous night's discussions with Mark had clarified responsibilities that John now could not ignore. His late uncle's meticulous plans had set the stage, yet the weight of the decisions ahead pressed heavily on him. He turned back inside, where his apartment was a quiet sanctuary from the commotion of the streets, the hum of early traffic below a constant reminder that life moved forward with or without consent. The folders from Whitmore Capital lay neatly on the dining table, each containing detailed strategies, legal documentation, and actionable plans that would guide John through the labyrinth of corporate obligations and personal stakes. He opened the folder marked Operations Oversight and scanned through the reports, noting key personnel, ongoing projects, and potential risks. Each page was meticulously organized, offering a clear view of what needed attention immediately and what could be scheduled for later review. While the cold night had forced him to seek refuge indoors, the crisp morning air seemed to energize him, sharpening his focus and reinforcing the clarity he had begun to feel the previous evening. Thoughts of Emily and her family lingered. Their abrupt and unconsidered actions at midnight now felt less like humiliation and more like catalysts, pushing John to recognize the resilience he had always carried but had yet to fully employ. He made notes, categorizing decisions by urgency, potential impact, and alignment with both ethical and financial guidelines, understanding that each choice would reverberate beyond his immediate environment. The calls he placed to key advisors were calm, yet deliberate, each conversation reinforcing a shared understanding that the stakes were high, but the mechanisms for success were firmly in place. By mid-morning, John had created a comprehensive action plan, prioritizing tasks, scheduling meetings, and confirming that all legal and financial controls were engaged and effective. The coffee on the counter cooled slowly as he worked, untouched, because every second now carried weight, and the discipline required to maintain focus was paramount. He reflected on his own journey, from being blindsided by familial decisions to now commanding a position of strategic authority, understanding that the emotional turbulence of the past was a necessary precursor to the clarity and control he now possessed. By the time the city fully awoke, John had mapped out the next steps for the enterprise, integrating operational oversight with personal safeguards, ensuring that neither impulsive decisions nor external pressures could destabilize the structures he now commanded. Each email drafted, each call made, each document reviewed was a deliberate exercise in precision and responsibility, setting the tone for a new chapter where John's foresight and planning dictated the course, transforming the challenges of yesterday into the strategic advantages of today. With the morning sun casting long shadows across the apartment, John finally allowed himself a moment of pause, surveying the city from above and appreciating the magnitude of both his inheritance and his newfound command, prepared to navigate the complexities of business, relationships, and personal integrity with deliberate and measured actions that reflected both foresight and resilience. John leaned back in his office chair, the sunlight casting warm patterns across the polished wooden floor, reflecting off the neatly organized files that documented his rapidly expanding responsibilities. He could hear the distant hum of city traffic through the large windows, each vehicle a reminder of the world moving forward, indifferent to personal struggles, yet full of opportunities for those prepared to act decisively. Today was critical. He had already outlined strategies to stabilize key departments and ensure operational continuity, but now the real test was putting plans into motion, coordinating with department heads, and addressing potential bottlenecks before they could escalate. His mind drifted briefly to the previous night's revelations about Emily and her family, the emotional sting still fresh, yet tempered by his growing confidence in his ability to manage both personal and professional domains with integrity. He picked up his tablet and reviewed the schedule, noting meetings with legal counsel, financial advisors, and operations managers, each conversation carefully calibrated to balance transparency with strategic discretion. John made a call to the operations manager, discussing resource allocation and upcoming project timelines, ensuring that no detail was overlooked and that every team member understood their responsibilities within the larger organizational framework. As the discussion continued, John's tone remained calm yet authoritative, demonstrating a leadership style forged from necessity and sharpened by recent experiences, reinforcing trust and clarity among his colleagues. By late morning, he had completed a series of briefings, each carefully documented, each plan integrated with overarching company objectives, and each contingency anticipated to prevent any disruption. He paused to reflect, recognizing that the challenges presented by his family dynamics had unwittingly strengthened his resolve, providing the focus and determination required to navigate complex corporate structures with skill and foresight. The office was quiet except for the occasional ringing of phones and the soft click of keyboards as staff executed their tasks efficiently, following the framework John had established. By mid-afternoon, he had arranged a conference call with external stakeholders, presenting a clear vision for the company's next phase, articulating priorities, and addressing questions with precision, earning respect and reassurance from all participants. Throughout the day, John maintained a careful balance between addressing immediate operational needs and setting the stage for long-term strategic success, recognizing that each decision carried weight and influence beyond the walls of his office. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the city skyline, John allowed himself a brief moment of reflection, appreciating the resilience and clarity he had cultivated, ready to face the remaining challenges with a composed, measured approach that promised both personal growth and professional achievement, ensuring that every action taken aligned with both ethical standards and the vision he had meticulously crafted for the future. The evening sun cast a soft amber glow across the city skyline as John walked through the office corridors, his mind racing with the delicate balance between personal life and the mounting responsibilities of his position. He paused briefly at the glass doors, reflecting on the recent decisions that had shifted both his family and professional dynamics, recognizing that clarity and patience were now his greatest assets. The quiet hum of the office computers and the faint chatter of the few remaining staff created a calm backdrop as he reviewed the day's outcomes in his mind, noting the subtle progress in communication with his colleagues and the tentative steps toward restoring trust within his team. A call from the legal department reminded him of the urgent matter regarding contractual obligations and potential conflicts that needed immediate attention, and he moved toward his office, carefully mapping out each point to ensure no detail was overlooked. Sitting at his desk, he opened the secure files containing the latest reports, scanning through financial analyses and operational updates, noting patterns and opportunities for proactive measures that could avert complications and reinforce the stability of his projects. Simultaneously, John reflected on Emily's reactions, the nuanced emotions that hinted at both regret and defiance, and considered the implications for the family dynamic, realizing that his composed response and steady leadership could subtly guide outcomes without overt confrontation. As he organized his notes, he scheduled strategic meetings for the coming week, including one with department heads to align priorities and another with external partners to clarify expectations and build confidence. Throughout the process, he maintained a measured tone and careful wording, knowing that each decision carried the potential to influence both perception and performance. By late evening, he had completed a thorough review of pending issues, each carefully documented and addressed, creating a clear roadmap for the days ahead, reinforcing operational integrity while balancing the delicate personal circumstances surrounding his family. He finally leaned back, allowing a brief moment to observe the city lights flickering to life below, a silent testament to the continuous motion and the opportunities it presented. In this reflective pause, John recognized that his ability to remain centered and deliberate in the face of emotional complexity was not only a professional necessity, but a personal strategy to cultivate resilience, trust, and thoughtful influence, setting the stage for meaningful progress in both spheres of his life and ensuring that every step taken was deliberate, informed, and aligned with both ethical standards and long-term goals. As the first light of dawn crept through the office blinds, John reviewed the final steps needed to stabilize his personal and professional life, aware that each decision now carried a deeper weight, shaping not only outcomes at work but the fragile balance within his family. He took a deep breath, recalling the previous nights of reflection and careful planning, and began to outline priorities for the day, focusing on actionable measures that would reinforce trust, clarify intentions, and gradually rebuild the relationships that had been strained, making careful notes on communication strategies and contingency plans that could address potential misunderstandings before they escalated. Simultaneously, he considered Emily's evolving perspective. The subtle signs of her reassessment of past actions and acknowledgement of the complexities of their situation, realizing that patience and consistent demonstration of integrity could guide the family dynamic toward stability and mutual understanding without confrontation, allowing space for reconciliation to naturally emerge. Throughout the morning, John conducted meetings with department heads and external partners, articulating expectations with clarity and empathy, reinforcing operational cohesion, and balancing the human element alongside strategic objectives, ensuring that everyone involved felt respected, informed, and aligned with the broader goals, while also managing personal interactions that required tact, particularly conversations with Emily, where listening, validating, and calm reasoning allowed previously tense moments to evolve into constructive dialogue. By midday, John had successfully coordinated crucial initiatives while subtly influencing the family atmosphere, his actions reflecting a blend of professional diligence and personal sensitivity, and he paused to reflect on the journey from prior conflicts to this point, noting that resilience, foresight, and the ability to maintain composure under emotional stress had been instrumental in achieving progress. As he prepared to step out for a brief walk, he contemplated the lessons learned about communication, patience, and strategic empathy, understanding that growth often emerged from challenges, and he encouraged himself to maintain this mindset, which would continue to guide both his leadership and his familial interactions. As the day concluded, John documented reflections on the evolving situation, capturing insights about human behavior, negotiation, and the delicate art of rebuilding trust. And in this reflective moment, he invited viewers to consider, how would you react if faced with similar circumstances, and what steps might you take to balance personal integrity with family relationships? Gently encouraging them to subscribe and follow the journey for more insightful perspectives on family, resilience, and thoughtful decision-making, leaving them with both reflection and anticipation for future developments.